I've been asked what went through my mind the moment I saw her on that kitchen floor. Whether I screamed, whether I called someone right away, whether I lost control. I didn't. What I did after that morning, some folks would call it ruthless. I call it overdue. Welcome back, friend. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let me tell you what happened when I walked back into my own house 11 days early and found out exactly what my family had been doing behind my back. If you're new here, drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from tonight. Hit subscribe if you haven't, because trust me, this one earns it. Now, let me start from the beginning, because you need the whole picture before you'll understand why I don't lose a minute of sleep over what I did next. My name is Walter Higgins. I'm 66 years old, and I've been married to Doris for 34 years. Up until 16 days ago, I would have told anybody who asked that my family was steady. Not without its bumps. No family is, but steady. The kind of steady you build one ordinary Tuesday at a time, showing up when nobody claps for it, covering the bills nobody thanks you for, loving people even when loving them costs you something. Our son Marcus is 31. Tall like his mother's side, easy smile, decent job at a logistics company downtown, a job I'll admit I helped him land through an old college buddy of mine. We'll get to that. Marcus married into the Pruitt family about 3 years back. His wife Renee, she's sweet, no complaints there. But her father, Boyd Pruitt, and her mother, Carla, the very first time I shook Boyd's hand at the engagement dinner, something in me went quiet and wary, the way a dog goes quiet before a storm. I shook it anyway, smiled anyway. You do that for your son. That was mistake number one, and I didn't even know I was making it. 16 days ago, I flew out to Charlotte for what was supposed to be a 4-day stretch of supplier meetings. I do this 3, 4 times a year. Nothing unusual. Doris has always known the routine, kissed me at the door, told me to call when I land. What nobody knew, not even Doris, was that 2 of my Charlotte meetings got pushed to the following month. I could have stayed. Sat by the hotel pool, caught up on paperwork, treated myself to a steak dinner on the company card. Instead, I booked the earliest flight home I could find. 34 years married, and I still like surprising my wife. Don't judge me for it. I landed a little after 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday, grabbed my duffel bag, and drove myself home from the airport instead of calling for a ride, because I wanted to walk through that front door and see her face light up. Now here's the first detail I need you to hold on to, friend, because everything that follows hangs on it. When I turned onto Larkspur Lane, I saw a car in my driveway that didn't belong there. Boyd's maroon Cadillac, the one he treats like a throne on wheels, parked crooked across half my driveway like he owned the concrete under it. That same uneasy feeling crawled up my spine. I told myself I was being an old paranoid fool. Maybe they'd stop by for lunch. Maybe Marcus invited them. Families visit each other. That's normal. I was just tired from the flight and reading into nothing. I parked on the street, grabbed my bag, and walked up to my own front door like a stranger easing into somebody else's life. The house was loud, but wrong loud, layered loud. 2 different worlds happening under one roof, and neither one aware of the other. From the direction of the den, I could hear laughing. Comfortable, easy laughing, ice clinking in glasses, somebody's phone playing music low in the background. And from the kitchen, nothing, not peaceful, nothing, heavy, nothing. I pushed the door open, and I saw her. Doris was on the kitchen floor. Not sitting, not resting, on the floor, her back against the cabinet under the sink, her legs folded awkward beneath her, and her left hand pressed hard against her collarbone like she was trying to hold something in that wanted out. There was a dark stain spreading across the front of her blue cardigan, and I felt my whole chest cave in on itself. Blood. Her eyes found mine the instant I stepped through that door, and friend, I need you to understand something. I have watched that woman cry at her sister's funeral. I have watched her cry over a burnt casserole because it reminded her of her own mother's cooking. I have never, not once in 34 years, seen her look at me the way she looked at me right then, like she'd been holding her breath for longer than a person should have to. Like the second she saw my face, some part of her finally exhaled and said, "He's here now, I can stop fighting so hard." That look is the thing that decided everything that came after it. I did not panic. I want that on the record. I am not a man who panics. I dropped my bag right there in the doorway, crossed that kitchen in maybe 4 strides, dropped to my knees beside her, and had 911 on the phone before I even finished checking her pulse. While the dispatcher walked me through keeping her upright and calm, while I pressed a dish towel against the spot under her collarbone where the blood kept welling up, I could still hear them from the den, laughing. My 31-year-old son and Boyd and Carla Pruitt, laughing over drinks like it was any old Thursday afternoon, like my wife wasn't 20 feet away from them bleeding onto her own kitchen tile. Sit with that for a second, friend. I had to. The paramedics got there in 7 minutes. 7 minutes that dragged out longer than any 7 minutes I've lived through, and I've lived through some long ones. They came in fast and steady, the kind of calm that only comes from people who've seen the real thing more times than they can count. The lead paramedic, a woman, maybe 40, name tag said Ferris, checked Doris's vitals, and then looked up at me with an expression that told me the bad part before her mouth ever opened. Mr. Higgins, she said, quiet and even. Your wife's got a laceration here that's deeper than it looks, and her blood pressure is through the roof. This wasn't just a fall. Somebody needs to tell me what happened in this house today. I looked toward the den, where the laughing had gone dead silent the second the sirens pulled up outside. And something in me that had been hot and shaking a minute ago went very, very still. Cold, if I'm honest with you. I held Doris's hand until they got her onto the stretcher. She squeezed my fingers, weak, but there. I squeezed back, twice. Our little signal, going back 30-some years. Then I stood up, straightened my shirt, and walked toward that den like a man who already knew exactly what he was going to find. If you've stuck with me this far, do me a small favor and hit that subscribe button. Doesn't cost you a dime, means the world to a channel like this one. Thank you kindly, truly. I've walked into plenty of rooms over 66 years. Rooms where I closed deals worth more than my house. Rooms where doctors told me things about my own father I didn't want to hear. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for walking into that den. The laughing had died the moment the ambulance lights hit the front windows. The three of them were sitting there frozen around my coffee table, drinks sweating rings into the wood, a bag of tortilla chips split open between them like they'd settled in for the afternoon. Marcus on the couch. Boyd in my recliner, friend and Carla perched on the arm of it, all three of them looking at me like deer caught in a spotlight. I stood in that doorway a long moment, just stood there. I've learned over the years that the most dangerous thing a man can do when he's furious is slow everything down. Every nerve in your body screams at you to raise your voice, to move fast, to make them feel the size of what they've done. But slow is scarier. Slow tells people you've already made your decision, and nothing coming out of their mouths is going to change it. So I stood there, slow and quiet, and I looked at my son. Marcus stood up first. I'll give him that much. He stood the second our eyes met, which told me somewhere behind that 31-year-old face, some part of him already understood exactly how bad this was. Dad, he started. I held up one finger. Just one. He stopped talking. I turned to Boyd first. Silver hair combed back, golf tan, the kind of man who's never done an honest day's labor but talks about the market like he built it himself. He had his hands folded over his stomach like he was settling in for a Sunday sermon, like he belonged in my recliner. I looked at him a long moment. Then I said, and I kept my voice so level it probably scared him worse than yelling would have, "Get out of my house." Boyd blinked. Carla set her drink down on my coffee table without a coaster, which under any other circumstance would have irritated me plenty. Marcus opened his mouth. Dad, just let me. I'm not talking to you yet, I said, still calm, still slow. I looked back at Boyd. Get out of my house, both of you, and I'm only saying it once more. Boyd shifted in my recliner and did exactly what I figured he'd do. Tried to sound reasonable, leaned forward with that salesman's smile and said, Walter, now let's not get carried away here. We can talk this through like grown men. Boyd. He stopped. I didn't ask you to talk this through. I asked you to leave my house. Carla grabbed her purse fast, touched Boyd's arm, gave him that look wives give when they mean it's time to go. Right now, don't push this. Boyd got up slow, the way men do when they want you to believe they're leaving because they chose to, not because you made them. As they passed through the kitchen toward the front door, they saw her. Doris on the stretcher, oxygen mask strapped over her face, an IV already running into her arm, Ferris and her partner working fast and efficient around her. Carla stopped cold in the doorway. Her hand flew up over her mouth. Boyd froze solid, staring at the blood-soaked towel on the floor tile. I watched the color drain clean out of both their faces. Good. I wanted that image burned into them. They left without another word between them. The front door clicked shut, and the house went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming from the kitchen. Just me and Marcus now. He was still standing by the couch, hands loose at his sides, jaw tight enough to crack a walnut. He's got his mother's eyes. Always has. And right then those eyes couldn't decide if they wanted to look ashamed or defensive. I walked slow into the den and sat down in the chair across from him, folded my hands in my lap, looked at him. "Sit down, Marcus." He sat. "Talk," I said. "All of it." He let out a breath, dragged a hand down his face, and started talking. And friend, what came out of my son's mouth over the next few minutes rearranged everything I thought I understood about that afternoon. Marcus told me Boyd and Carla hadn't just dropped by. They'd been planning the visit for nearly a month, waited on purpose for me to be out of state, and showed up with paperwork. Actual documents, related to a strip of rental property I've owned outright for over 20 years, 4 units I've always told Marcus would come to him eventually. Boyd had somehow convinced himself that eventually meant today, and that with enough pressure on Marcus, he could get him to co-sign paperwork that would start shifting management authority of that property while I was 3 states away and couldn't stop it. I want you to really hear that, friend. These people sat in my own den, ate my chips, drank my sweet tea, and tried to talk my son into signing away something I built with my own 2 hands, while I was gone and my wife was bleeding 20 feet from where they sat. I kept my face still as stone. Inside was a different story entirely. "And your mother," I said quiet, "where does she come into this?" Marcus looked down at his knees. "She heard us," he said. "Came into the den maybe half an hour after they got here, heard what Boyd was pushing for, and she wasn't having any of it, Dad. You know how she gets. 34 years, I know exactly how she gets. She told Boyd straight out that property wasn't mine to sign anything on." He kept going. "That you hadn't agreed to a thing, that they had no business coming here like this." Boyd talked over her. She got loud back. It went back and forth a few minutes, and then she stopped talking. He paused, throat working. She said her chest felt tight, said she needed to sit down in the kitchen a minute. I thought he stopped again. I was going to go check on her. Boyd started up again about the paperwork, and I got pulled back in, and I got pulled back in. He couldn't finish that sentence. Didn't need to. I sat with what he'd told me for a long stretch. The house was so quiet I could hear Ferris's low voice from the kitchen, the wheels of the stretcher rolling across my hardwood. "So, let me make sure I've got this right," I said. My voice had changed, and even Marcus noticed it, straightened up a little in his seat. "Your mother told your father-in-law, in her own home, that he was out of line. He talked over her. It got heated. She told you her chest was tight, and you went back to your seat." Marcus said nothing. "You went back to your seat," I said again. Not a question. Just laying the fact down on the table between us where neither one of us could pretend it away. "Dad, I didn't know it was that serious. She's had a heart condition for 4 years," I said. 4 years, Marcus. A stranger in a paramedic's uniform who never met your mother in her life understood the urgency the second she saw her. "And you," I stopped myself, because I felt it right then, that particular kind of grief that hits you when you've raised somebody, sacrificed everything for somebody, and you realize in one long terrible second that somewhere along the way, something didn't take. I stood up and said the last thing I planned on saying to my son that night. "I don't know who you've been letting yourself become, but he's not the man I raised." I walked out of that den, back to my wife's side, took her hand, and I didn't say another word to Marcus for the rest of the evening. But understand something, friend. That silence wasn't me letting it go. That silence was me thinking. And when Walter Higgins goes quiet, when he gets real still like that, that's exactly when you ought to start worrying. There's a particular kind of quiet that settles into a house around 2 in the morning. Not the peaceful kind you get after a good meal and good company. The other kind. The kind with weight to it. The kind that presses down on your ribs and makes every little sound, the ice maker dropping cubes, the hallway clock ticking, a car passing 2 streets over feel 10 times louder than it has any business being. That's the quiet I sat in that night. Doris was finally asleep in our bedroom. It took the medication, the dimmed lamp, 3 pillows arranged just the way she likes them, and close to 45 minutes of me sitting on the edge of the mattress, holding her uninjured hand before her breathing evened out, and that beautiful, exhausted face of hers finally let go of the tension it had been holding all day. I watched her sleep a long while, thought about 34 years. Thought about the woman who married me back when I had more debt than sense, who worked 2 jobs beside me while we built this life from nothing but stubbornness, who raised our son with more patience than I ever managed and more grace than he's earned today, and more love than either of us probably realized in the moment we were living it. I thought about her on that kitchen floor, and then I stopped thinking, and I started moving. I went down to my study, sat at the desk, opened the laptop, cracked my knuckles, and got to work. Now, friend, you need to understand something about me before I walk you through what came next. I am not an impulsive man. I don't make big decisions boiling in the heat of a moment, and I don't do things I'll regret needing to walk back later. Every single thing I did that night, I'd already decided sitting across from Marcus in that den, hands folded, face still as a photograph. By the time I sat down at that desk, I wasn't angry anymore. I was decided. There's a world of difference between the two. First call went to the bank. Yes, at 2 in the morning. When you've held an account long enough, and you're the primary on it, there's a number on the back of that card that never sleeps. I've used it exactly twice in 34 years. This made 3. Marcus had been an authorized user on my main credit card for 5 years. 5 years of charges I never once questioned, never audited, never asked him to explain. Gas, groceries, that gym membership he swore he'd cancel and never did, the weekend in Savannah he called a guy's trip that I have my doubts ever involved much guy time at all, removed. The man on the phone was polite and quick about it. Took under 5 minutes. Asked if there was anything else he could help me with. Not tonight, I told him. Appreciate it. Hung up, moved to the next one. Auto insurance, dropped him off my policy before 3 a.m. The apartment took a little longer to untangle. I'd co-signed Marcus and Renee's lease 2 years back when they moved into that building downtown. Nice place, good area, the kind that wants a co-signer with real credit and a real income behind him. Mine. I called the property manager at 7, when I knew the office would be open. Fellow named Roy. Decent guy. We'd talked a handful of times before. Always brief and pleasant. This time, I told him I needed my name pulled off Marcus's lease at the soonest legal opportunity, and that I'd cooperate however that process needed me to. Roy went quiet a beat, then said, "Everything all right over there, Walter?" "Everything's being handled, Roy," I told him. "Appreciate you asking." Every first of the month, quiet, no ceremony to it, I'd been wiring money into Marcus's account. Started back when he was fresh out of college finding his footing. Turned into habit. Turned into something neither one of us ever talked about because we'd both just accepted it as how things worked between us. Logged in at 3:30 and canceled the standing transfer. Permanent. Not paused, not reduced. Gone. I sat back in my chair a minute after that one, because that transfer had come to represent something bigger than dollars. It was a version of my son I'd been quietly bankrolling, a comfort, a cushion, a safety net wide enough that maybe, just maybe, it let him make the kind of choices a man makes when he knows somebody's always there underneath him to catch the fall. Not anymore. Then came the calls I won't apologize for to anybody. Over the years, I'd made introductions for Marcus, opened doors, called in favors that took me decades to earn, favors that live entirely in whether people trust your word. I'd spent plenty of that trust on my son, gladly, proudly. I spent the early hours of that morning taking a good chunk of it back. Called men I've known 25 years, kept it honest without turning it into a production. Told them simply that Marcus wouldn't be operating under my name or my backing going forward, and that any consideration they'd been extending him on my account should be considered finished. Every single one of them asked if I was doing all right. Every single one respected the call and didn't push for the whole story. That's what 6 decades of keeping your word buys you, friend. People who trust that if Walter Higgins is making this call, Walter Higgins has his reasons. By 5 that morning, the streaming accounts were canceled, the shared cell plan split off, and I had a locksmith booked for 8 sharp. Made myself a cup of coffee, stood at the kitchen window, Watched the sky go from black to gray to that particular pale blue that means morning's arrived whether you're ready or not. Thought about Boyd sitting in his own house right now, probably not sleeping much either, probably wondering what was coming for him. He ought to wonder. That rental property, he came into my house to try and maneuver my son into signing away, the one he waited a month to bring paperwork for, the one he timed around me being gone. I'd already left my attorney a voicemail at 6 a.m., told her simply I needed the property documentation restructured, ironclad, airtight, done by end of week. Call me when she's in. Boyd Pruitt would never, not in this life, get anywhere near legal reach of anything I've spent 30 years building. Marcus showed up at the house around 9. I watched him from the upstairs window, saw him walk up to that front door with his shoulders set the way they get when a man's bracing for a hard conversation, watched him reach for his key, try it again, stand there a long moment, realizing. He knocked. I didn't answer. Knocked again. Nothing. Tried calling phone, must have died overnight because it went straight to voicemail. He stood on that porch a good while staring at the door like it might reconsider, then walked next door to the Alcotts. And I watched old Nora Alcott hand him her cell phone with the worried look of a woman who doesn't understand what's going on but knows it's serious. My phone rang. Saw Nora's number on the screen. I answered. There was a stretch of silence, and then his voice came through different than I'd ever heard it. The defensiveness was gone out of it entirely. What was underneath sounded raw, sounded young, sounded like the boy he used to be before the Pruitts got their hooks into whoever he'd been turning into. I let him sit in that silence a while. Then I said, "You let your mother sit on that kitchen floor, Marcus. You knew her condition. You knew exactly what stress does to her heart. And when she needed her son, you chose to go back to that table instead." He didn't say anything. I could hear him breathing hard through the phone. "I love you," I said. "I'll always love you. But loving somebody isn't the same as giving them access, and right now, every door I've kept open for you, I'm closing." Another silence, longer than the first. "For how long?" he finally asked, quiet. "Until you become the kind of man who doesn't need me to answer that question for him." I hung up. I walked back to our bedroom. Doris was awake, propped up against the pillows, morning light falling soft across her face, tired but present, herself again, my wife again. She looked at me a long moment. "Is everything all right?" she asked, soft. I sat down beside her, took both her hands in mine, looked her right in the eyes, the way you look at someone when you nearly lost them and need a second to feel grateful you didn't. "Everything," I told her, "is handled." She studied my face a moment longer, then nodded slow, and leaned her head against my shoulder. Outside, my son sat on the Alcott's front step with a dead phone, a declined card, and a key that didn't fit anything anymore, surrounded by the quiet wreckage of every comfort I'd spent years building around him without ever once asking him to earn it. Inside, I sat with my wife's hand in mine, and for the first time since I'd walked through that front door the day before, I let myself breathe. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Renee, Marcus's wife. Turns out she hadn't known the full extent of what her own parents had been planning that afternoon, and when she found out, she confronted them herself, told them flat out they weren't welcome back in her home if that's how they intended to treat family. Said Marcus had been different since it happened, quieter, working extra shifts. Called Doris himself, apologized for near on 20 minutes, and asked if he could come by just to sit with her, no expectations attached. I don't know yet what that road back looks like for us, or how long it'll take, or if it'll ever look the way it used to. But I know my wife is alive. I know she's safe, she's home, and some mornings that's the only thing worth measuring a day by. Some folks listening to this will say I was too hard on my own son. Maybe I was. But I watched a stranger in a paramedic's jacket treat my wife's emergency with more urgency than the man I raised did. And that night I decided the last real gift I had left to give Marcus wasn't keeping every door propped open for him forever. It was finally letting him feel, just once, what it costs when they close. If this story meant something to you tonight, do me a kindness and hit that like button, subscribe if you're new to this table, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Thank you for sitting with me through this one, friend. I'll see you at the next one.